Hello and welcome to another edition of Blackwater Insights. Today I'm joined by Athanasios Psarofagis from the Bloomberg ETF Data Intelligence team. Together we're going to take a look at the European ETF landscape for the month just past, covering flows, trends, winners, losers, as well as discussing our hot ETF topic of the month. Athanasios, great to have you here today.
Hey, Michael, nice to see you again.
So it was a pretty brutal month, I think, September, looking at the numbers, like nearly 8 billion of outflows across all asset classes in Europe. How did you guys think of that, and what did you make of it at Bloomberg?
Yeah, good observation. I think this might be the worst month going back to March 20.
Really?
It was a bad month. When you dig through it, it's not as bad as it looks. It looks like a lot of it was driven by a UBS and a BlackRock portfolio change, which I guess makes sense. It's the end of the quarter. They were making some big portfolio changes. So if you take that out, it's not as bad as we think. But for sure, the last couple months, flows have tapered off. And I think it jives with what's happening in the market. The commodity stories sort of faded. Fixed income's been tough. Equities have been rough, so there hasn't really been any place to hide. So definitely come down quite a bit. But, being an ETF guy, I think it's fair to mention mutual fund flows there's been quite a few redemptions on that side as well. I like to always look at the AFAMA data that comes out. I know that one's quite lagged, but I expect they probably were hit with some pretty big redemptions in the last month too as well. But it's just been tough. There's really been nowhere to go, unfortunately.
Yeah, I suppose like you made a good point, putting it into context. When you consider the outflows in ETFs versus the outflows in mutual funds, it looks a lot better in that regard, right? So it's interesting as well. You mentioned like some maybe trade or portfolio rebalancing with UBS and BlackRock. So in terms of like winners and losers over the course of the month, what were your observations around that?
So for sure, at the bottom of the list was iShares and UBS, but I think given iShares' sheer size, it can easily go back up to the top in the next month or so. But what has been interesting is Vanguard. I think it was Vanguard and HSBC were the two big winners for the month. And what's been interesting about Vanguard, they've steadily been at the top of the leaderboard pretty consistently this year, which sort of bodes the question is when markets get rough, do they start to gain a little bit of ground, right? Because they're known as being cheap. They sort of have dedicated investors. They're not necessarily fleeing, when the markets are gyrating, they're sort of just steadily always putting money into it. So Vanguard actually, in terms of flows, I think might be second overall this year. So they're having quite a good year. They don't quite have the market share that they do in the US, but they're growing pretty steadily on some of the other competitors. So I thought that stuck out to me. Just, people seeming to put cost at the forefront when the markets get bad, and they've been consistently taking in money every month.
No, it's an interesting observation as well. I read something somewhere last week whereby Vanguard were kind of closing in on BlackRock's position in the US, and obviously you cannot compare their size and scale in the US versus here in Europe, but they've certainly been, as you said, kind of just steadily kind of chipping away at the market share ever since they entered the market, which I don't know, was it 10 years ago now or whatever. Yeah. So they're definitely going in the right direction, right? And then you mentioned HSBC as well. Again, they're another shop that's been doing pretty well over the course of, I guess, the last two years or so, steadily kind of gaining market share every month and being pretty consistent in terms of the top of the leaderboard, right?
Yeah, they've been great. And I remember in the last sort of year or so, they've been pretty aggressive with hiring, especially on the distribution side. And, given their network in the UK, I think I always wondered that they should be bigger than they are in ETFs. So maybe now they're finally starting to open up and come around to it a little bit more, and you're sort of seeing them pop up more and more often. But they've invested quite a bit in that ETF business over the last 3 years, so it looks like it's paying off for them.
Yeah, no, definitely, and you're right. I'm sure they're pretty happy with what they're doing so far. But when you think about it, like they've got everything. They've got the distribution capabilities, even like through their bank network and private bank network. Sure. They've got administration services. So they've got should be probably a lot closer to the top than maybe they are, but I'm sure they're working on that. So yeah. I guess the other big news story in ETF land in September has been the launch of the AXA Investment Management ETF platform. So they came to the market with two actively managed ETFs, a biodiversity and a climate equity ETF, both priced at 70 basis points and listed on Deutsche Börse in Germany. So for me, I thought that was a pretty significant new entrant to the market, especially going active, and like they're, by all intents and purposes, it looks like it's fully active, as in like a stock picking portfolio. So what are your observations about that launch?
I'm probably less excited about the products, honestly, as I am about just AXA coming in. I think it's nice to have more entrants coming into the market. And I guess when you think about it through their eyes, it sort of makes sense. Do they want to just launch another large cap core product, right? That's a really tough space. You're going up against the likes of iShares, Vanguard, and everyone else. So I would have to guess, new entrants coming in and probably go this active route. And but it's still exciting to see issuers come in, especially with the market sort of being a little rough lately. I don't know if some of the issuers might hesitate to launch product or wait a little bit. But it was definitely nice to have a new competitor, especially a big one too. So maybe we'll see some other big names follow suit, because there's still quite a few big shops that haven't quite jumped in yet. Yeah. So hopefully maybe this might open the door for some other ones to step in as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let's hope so. I think it's good. It's good for the industry when you get big players like this entering the space. So it would definitely be nice to see. So the final observation I had was around the theme of the Metaverse, which I guess is a pretty big theme in the world right now. And there was a kind of a flurry of launches towards the end of the month when we saw Franklin Templeton, Legal & General, and Fidelity launch Metaverse, all in the space of about 2 days of one another. That comes kind of fresh on top. There's already two products in the market right now, a Round Hill product and an ETC Group product. So obviously there are two small players. And now you've got three very large players. So what did you think about that?
I guess it's a validation for the theme, right? So especially when you have the big players come in, I know LGIM's always been sort of popular in the thematics. It's a lot of products for that theme to sustain, I think. I don't know if all of them are going to be able to have the success that they do, but we will see. It probably seems, when there's a lot of products for the theme, either cost or performance is going to be the one that's going to separate the winner here. But it's nice to see the competition, but I think unfortunately not all of them are going to be able to sustain assets. I think it's just too many products for that theme, honestly.
I guess time will tell on that one, so that's something to revisit in the future and see whether your predictions are right or wrong on that. So, all right, Athanasios, thanks so much for your insight. Super interesting as usual. So hope everybody enjoyed that, and until next month.